Statement, Dmitry Bidechevsky, director of the Ministry's Department of Economic Cooperation, has warned that Moscow is prepared to respond, urging Brussels to reconsider what he called ill-considered actions. This follows European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen's announcements, where she clarified that while the EU would not confiscate the assets valued at over 200 billion euros, those funds could support a so-called reparations loan to aid Ukraine. Russia has sharply opposed any use of its sovereign reserves, with President Vladimir Putin warning of deep consequences for the global economic order and the Kremlin vowing legal retaliation. Now, for this discussion, we go back to Professor Vasilin Bohosky. He's a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School. Thank you very much, Professor, for staying with us. Now, what will be the repercussions if they were to use these funds to get loans to Ukraine?
I don't see. It's usually everything coming out of Kremlin is kind of empty talk. It's either a lie or some sort of manipulation. And in this sense, the sanctions on Russia, on Russian individuals, not on the Russia as general, but specific individuals and companies were sanctioned back after the invasion of Crimea 11 years ago. And correctly so, because those were individuals and companies that benefited from the annexation of Crimea, so that every military or some individuals or bank or company that was connected and benefited from illegal occupation of Crimea was under sanctions. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. And the European Commission also mentions that these assets will be part of reparations one day. They are not frozen forever. And they will be used for the kind of deducted from the reparations that Russia will need to pay for all the destructions and loss of life and children in Ukraine. So it will be a huge bill, by the way. Once it is finished and it is calculated, Russia will need to pay much more than those 200 billion frozen in assets. So all the statements by the Russian foreign ministers are absolute nonsense. And it will be legal. There will be a legal ceasefire, legal peace agreement, like it was done after the First World War and the Second World War, and the reparations that were paid by the countries like Germany at the time, and so on. So there is nothing to listen. I don't even want to comment, even less to listen what the foreign ministry in Russia is saying on that. And for that matter, yes, everything will be properly done. And repercussion, again, Russia always mentions some sort of retaliation, but we simply don't see any capability of Russia to do any retaliation. They are basically doing very little on the battlefield as well. You mentioned earlier, you quoted Vladimir Putin on his birthday saying 5,000 kilometers, but the front line is 1,000 kilometers. He simply doesn't understand that what he said actually means 1 kilometer per the battlefield itself, which is basically nothing for 1 year. You know, the slowest animal on earth is a snail, and a snail will walk faster than the Russian army. So it's really ridiculous, those statements. And somehow, again, to continue this ridicule, you know, that if a snail moved from Bryansk in February 2022, that snail would have reached Berlin by now. So this is the speed of the Russian advance. A snail, the slowest animal in the world, will walk faster than the Russian army into Ukraine. So again, there are plenty of jokes and anecdotes here coming from Russia, basically amusing, and they have no sense.
Yes, and Professor, going back to this news, what is the European Commission stance on the legal as well as ethical implication of if they were to use frozen Russian assets to aid Ukraine?
Well, obviously the assets will be used to aid Ukraine. There's absolutely no problem, legal or ethical or whatsoever. Once the war is over, there will be a conference, peace conference, and there will be a kind of a peace treaty. I guess it will be signed by a new president in the Russian Federation. Putin will be gone by that time, and the next Russian leader will accept the capitulation and basically would agree those assets to be used to the restoration of Ukraine. Ukraine is the victim here, very clear, black and white. There is no argument against that, that all the Russian frozen assets should be used to restore the economy, the individual losses, and everything.